The SEAL compound buzzed with noise, drills, shouting, chaos. At the medical tent, a young woman cleaned a soldier's wound with quiet precision. When she reached to grab fresh gauze, her sleeve slid up, revealing an old tattoo, a trident wrapped in a red ribbon. The room fell silent. One of the men whispered, "Wait, that's SEAL Team 4's insignia." The door swung open. A commander stepped in. He froze. "Who is she?" he demanded. No one spoke. The woman turned, calm eyes meeting his, her voice steady. "Just the medic you left behind, sir." Lieutenant Maya Torres was 30 years old. She was a former Navy combat medic. She'd served in Yemen and Syria, lost contact with her team during Operation Black Sand 3 years ago. She was presumed killed in action. After recovering, she returned to work at a SEAL training base in California, under an assumed name to avoid media attention. No one at the base knew she had served on the front lines. Her file only listed her as civilian medical contractor. The soldiers usually called her Doc Torres, teasing her for being quiet and too calm. One morning, while she was stitching up a wound for a new recruit, a corporal said, "You sure you've seen combat, Doc?" She just smiled. "I've seen worse things than this tent." Commander Ethan Ward was 42 years old. He commanded SEAL Team 4. He was known for being strict. He had just returned from a mission in Libya. He didn't care about civilians on base until the day he saw her at the medical station. When light hit her left wrist, he caught a glimpse of a tattoo, a SEAL trident wrapped in red ribbon with numbers below it, 04-21-19. He stopped walking. "Where did you get that?" She answered briefly. "Long story, Commander." He frowned. "That symbol's restricted to Team 4, my team." She smiled but didn't explain. He watched her go, feeling like he'd just seen a ghost walk out of the past. The base at Camp Echo was a training ground for the next generation of special operators. Maya had been there for 6 months. She kept to herself, did her job, asked no questions. The other medical staff respected her skills, but found her strange. She never talked about her past, never joined them for drinks, never complained about the long hours. One nurse asked her during a break, "Torres, you got family?" Maya shook her head. "Not anymore." The nurse didn't press further. Something in Maya's eyes said the conversation was over. At night, Maya lived in a small apartment off base. The walls were bare, no pictures, no decorations, just a desk with medical journals and a wooden box on the nightstand. Inside the box was a piece of burned metal, part of a name tag engraved with SEAL-04/Torres, M. She never took it out, just touched the box before sleeping, like a prayer. The SEALs at Camp Echo were a mixed group. Some were veterans preparing for new deployments. Others were fresh from training, eager to prove themselves. They treated Maya with polite distance. She was useful, but not one of them. Not really. One afternoon, a young SEAL named Carter approached her. "Doc, I heard you've been doing this for years. Where'd you serve before here?" She didn't look up from her paperwork. "Different places." He waited for more. Nothing came. He tried again. "Combat zones." She finally met his eyes. "Does it matter?" He backed off. "No, ma'am, just curious." She returned to her work, but he noticed something. When she wrote, her hand moved with military precision. When she walked, her posture was too perfect. When alarms went off during drills, she didn't flinch. She was trained, really trained. Commander Ward couldn't shake the image of that tattoo. He spent the evening going through old files. Operation Black Sand, 2019. His team had been ambushed in Yemen. They'd taken heavy casualties, 3 dead, 2 wounded, and 1 medic, missing, presumed dead. He pulled up the casualty report. Lieutenant Maya Torres, combat medic attached to SEAL Team 4. Last seen providing cover fire during extraction. Search efforts suspended after 48 hours. He stared at the photo in the file. It was her, younger, hair longer, but definitely her. He closed the file and sat back. She was alive, and she was here. Why hadn't she told anyone? Why hide under a fake identity? He decided to find out. The next morning, Ward found Maya at the medical tent. She was organizing supplies. He stood in the doorway. "We need to talk." She didn't turn around. "About what, Commander?" He stepped inside. "About Yemen. About black sand. About why you're pretending to be a civilian." She stopped working, slowly turned to face him. "I'm not pretending. I am a civilian now." He crossed his arms. "Your tattoo says otherwise." She looked down at her wrist. "It's just ink." He shook his head. "No, it's a mark of service, and you earned it." She met his eyes. "I also lost the right to wear it when you left me there." The words hung in the air, heavy, painful. Ward's jaw tightened. "We searched for you." She nodded. "For 2 days. Then you moved on." He stepped closer. "We had orders. We had no choice." She turned back to her supplies. "I know. That's why I don't blame you." In her coat pocket, she always carried a piece of burned metal, part of a name tag engraved with Seal 04, Torres, M. She never removed it, like an unfulfilled promise. Rumors spread throughout the base. Doc Torres has a SEAL tattoo. A young soldier asked, "Is she one of us?" A superior answered, "Impossible. Women never served in SEAL ops." But that night in the medical office, Maya reviewed old combat files. A photo of SEAL Team 4 appeared. 7 men and a blurred figure in the corner. The photographer was her. She whispered to herself, "You all made it home. That's enough." The next morning, Commander Ward was ordered to conduct joint training with a new team. During live fire exercises, a recruit was injured by a ricocheting fragment. The entire team panicked. Blood poured. Maya ran over, knelt down, pressed the artery, worked with extreme precision. Ward shouted, "Step back! Medics stay on the perimeter!" She didn't listen. Her hands worked with exact rhythm. "Clamp ready on my mark now." The bleeding stopped. Ward stared at her, stunned. "Where did you learn that procedure?" She answered lightly. "In Yemen, under your old call sign, sir." "Eagle 2. He jerked back. "How the hell do you know that name?" She looked straight at him. "Because I was the one patching you when your shoulder was hit." He froze. Memories rushed back. Explosions, burning sand, a female voice over the radio. "Stay with me, Commander." It had been her, all along. She had been there in his worst moment, the moment he thought he'd die. And she had saved him. He stumbled back a step. "Torres," she nodded. "Yes, sir." He struggled to find words. "I thought you were dead." She gave a sad smile. "I was, for a while." The wounded recruit was stabilized and taken to the medical facility. The rest of the team stood in shocked silence. Carter approached Maya carefully. "Doc, is it true? You were with Team 4? She packed her medical kit. "A long time ago." He pressed further. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" She stood up. "Because some things are better left buried." But Ward wasn't letting it go. He pulled her aside after the training session. "We need to debrief this, officially." She shook her head. "There's nothing to debrief. I was there. You left. I survived. End of story." Ward's voice rose. "It's not the end. You're a decorated combat veteran working as a contractor under a fake name. That's a problem." She met his intensity with calm. "It's only a problem if I make it one, and I won't." He grabbed her arm, not rough but firm. "Maya, why are you hiding?" She pulled away. "Because I'm not that person anymore." That night, Ward couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the memories. Yemen, the ambush, the chaos. He remembered the medic who had dragged him to cover, who had stopped his bleeding while bullets flew overhead, who had called in the extraction while he faded in and out of consciousness. He remembered her voice, calm, steady, fearless. And then he remembered the moment they had to leave. The helicopter couldn't land again. Too much fire, too much risk. Command ordered them to abort. He had screamed into the radio, "We have a medic down here." The response was cold. "Negative, Eagle 2. Extraction window closed. RTB. Return to base. Leave her behind." He had argued, begged, threatened. Nothing worked. They flew away, and he watched the desert disappear below. knowing someone was still down there, knowing it was his fault. The next day, Ward opened the old file for Operation Black Sand, casualty reports, after-action reviews, investigation summaries, and then he found it. A note buried deep in the classified section. Medic Torres, presumed KIA, last seen providing covering fire during extraction under enemy contact. Below that was a symbol, a trident, smudged with what looked like blood. Someone had tried to honor her, even in death. Ward sat back, feeling the weight of it. She hadn't just been left behind. She had stayed behind, voluntarily. To cover their escape, she had sacrificed herself so they could live. And somehow, against all odds, she had survived. He closed the file and made a decision. She deserved to know the truth, all of it. Ward found Maya in the training yard, supervising a first aid drill. He waited until she was done. "We need to talk, not as commander and contractor, as people who were there." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." They walked to a quiet spot behind the equipment shed. Ward pulled out a folded paper. "I found the after-action report, the real one, not the sanitized version." He handed it to her. She unfolded it slowly. "Read it." Her face showed no emotion, but her hands trembled slightly. "You stayed behind on purpose." It wasn't a question. She nodded. "The helicopter couldn't take everyone. Someone had to cover the retreat." Ward's voice cracked. "You should have told us." She looked up. "And what would you have done? Stayed and died with me?" "No. I made the call, and I'd make it again." He stepped closer. "How did you survive?" She folded the paper and handed it back. "Luck, stubbornness, and a promise I made to myself." He waited. She continued. "I promised I'd make it home, even if it took years, even if no one remembered me. I'd make it home." Ward's eyes were wet. "We remembered, every single day." When the training ended, he opened the old file from Operation Black Sand and saw a faded note. Medic Torres, presumed KIA, last seen assisting extraction under fire. Below it was a trident symbol smudged with blood. 1 week later, the base organized a realistic combat drill. During training, they received an actual alert. "Rogue hostile breach at gate. Possible live ammunition." Explosions echoed throughout the camp. Ward immediately deployed his team to respond. A soldier was shot in the shoulder and fell. Maya ran into the line of fire without waiting for orders. She shouted, "Cover fire, right flank!" Ward roared, "Doc, get back!" She didn't listen. She grabbed a tourniquet, used her body to shield the dust, kept pressure on the young soldier's wound. When the shooting stopped, Ward rushed over and pulled her into cover. "What the hell were you thinking?" She looked at him, breathing hard. "Thinking about who trained me." He recognized in those eyes the soldier who had saved him from fire years ago. When military police secured the situation, he pulled back her sleeve and looked at the tattoo again. "Team 4, that was my unit." She nodded. "You left after Black Sand. They thought I died. I didn't." He froze, eyes red. "We searched for you for 2 days." She replied, "Then you taught me what surviving really means." The statement hit him like a punch. He had taught her. In all those months of deployment before Black Sand, he had trained her how to think under fire, how to stay calm when everyone else panicked, how to make impossible decisions. And she had used everything he taught her to survive alone in enemy territory for 3 days, until a local smuggler found her and helped her reach a UN checkpoint. She'd been broken, infected, half dead, but alive. The weeks that followed were tense. The base commander wanted answers. Why was a presumed dead combat veteran working under false credentials? Maya was called into multiple debriefings. She answered every question with the same calm she showed in combat. "I wanted to serve without the attention, without the questions, without being treated like a ghost story." The investigators didn't like it. They couldn't find any rules she'd broken. She had the qualifications. She had passed all the background checks under her new identity. Technically, she hadn't lied. She just hadn't volunteered information. Ward defended her at every turn. She's the best medic on this base. Hell, she's the best medic I've ever worked with. If you kick her out, you're making a mistake. The base commander sighed. I'm not kicking her out, but she needs to come clean, officially. No more hiding. Maya agreed. A base-wide announcement was made. Lieutenant Maya Torres, former combat medic with SEAL Team 4, had returned to service. The reaction was mixed. Some soldiers were inspired. Others were skeptical. How could a woman have served with SEALs before women were officially allowed? Maya didn't engage with the doubters. She just kept working, kept training, kept saving lives. One afternoon during an advanced trauma course, a student challenged her. Ma'am, with all respect, how do we know you really served in combat? The room went quiet. Maya set down her equipment, walked over to the student, pulled up her sleeve. See this scar? RPG shrapnel? Sana'a, 2018. This one? IED blast, Aden, 2019. And this? She pointed to a faint line on her neck. Sniper round that missed by 2 inches. The student went pale. I'm sorry, ma'am. She lowered her sleeve. Don't be sorry, be better. The climax came during an unexpected emergency. An armored vehicle caught fire near the fuel depot. Inside was a trapped officer. The entire team couldn't approach due to extreme heat. Maya ran toward it, using her jacket and an oxygen tank as a shield. She broke the door and pulled the officer out. Ward shouted after her, "That's suicide!" But she kept moving, her voice decisive over the radio. Once a medic, always the last one out. When she brought the man to safety, Ward knelt beside her and whispered, "You're not just Doc anymore. You're one of us." She looked at him, exhausted but smiling. "I never stopped being one of you." The base erupted in cheers. Soldiers surrounded Maya, thanking her, saluting her, treating her with the respect she had always deserved. Ward stood back, watching. He felt pride, relief, and something else, guilt, because he had left her once, and she had forgiven him, but he hadn't forgiven himself. Later, when the crowd dispersed, he found her sitting alone. "You saved my life twice now." She shook her head. "I was just doing my job." He sat beside her. "No, you were being a hero. There's a difference." She looked at him. "Heroes don't get left behind, Commander." The words stung, but they were true. He took a breath. "I'm sorry, for Yemen, for not fighting harder to stay, for leaving you alone." She was quiet for a moment, then she placed her hand on his. "You did what you had to do. I understood then. I understand now." He gripped her hand. "But I should have done more." She smiled softly. "You did. You came back. You found me. You didn't forget." And somehow that was enough. The following days were different. Maya was no longer the quiet contractor in the corner. She was Lieutenant Torres, combat veteran, SEAL medic, survivor. The soldiers treated her with reverence. The instructors asked for her input. The commanders consulted her on training protocols. She didn't like the attention, but she accepted it because it meant she could do more, help more, teach more. One evening, Carter approached her. "Ma'am, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded. "Go ahead." He hesitated. "When you were left behind, did you ever think about giving up?" She thought for a long moment. "Every hour, every minute. But then I'd think about the team, about the mission, about the promise I made, and I'd keep going." He nodded slowly. "That's what makes you different from the rest of us." She shook her head. "No, that's what makes me the same." If you believe some heroes never need rank to serve, type "I believe" in the comments. After the incident, the entire base knew the truth. Doc Torres was Lieutenant Maya Torres, combat medic of SEAL Team 4. Command sent a message of gratitude, but she declined a formal ceremony. "I didn't come back for medals, just to make sure no one else gets left behind." During the morning formation, Commander Ward stepped into the center of the yard and called out, "Team 4, fall in." Everyone lined up. He turned to her. "You stood by us when no one else would. You carried our mark before we carried it with honor." He raised his hand in salute. Every SEAL in the yard did the same. She bowed her head, voice trembling. "Permission to stand down, Commander." He smiled. "Denied." The moment was captured on phones and cameras. It spread beyond the base. News outlets picked it up. Veterans organizations shared it. Within days, Maya's story was everywhere. The medic who was left behind, the woman who survived, the hero who came back. She hated it, hated the interviews, the requests, the attention. But Ward convinced her to do one press conference. "People need hope. You can give them that." She reluctantly agreed. The conference room was packed. Journalists, veterans, families of fallen soldiers. Maya stood at the podium, uncomfortable in her dress uniform. "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who refused to quit. If my story helps even one person keep fighting, then it's worth sharing." The room erupted in applause. She stepped down quickly, eager to escape. But one person stopped her, an older woman with tears in her eyes. "My son served in Yemen. He didn't make it home." Maya's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry." The woman shook her head. "Don't be. He wrote about you in his letters. About the medic who never quit, who made them all feel safe. He said you were the bravest person he'd ever met." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "What was his name?" The woman whispered, "Corporal James Rivera." Maya remembered him. Young, eager, kind. He had been killed by a roadside bomb 2 weeks before Black Sand. She had tried to save him, failed, carried that guilt ever since. "He was a good man." The woman hugged her. "Thank you for trying. Thank you for remembering." Maya held her and cried, for Rivera, for all of them, for the ones she couldn't save. That night, Ward found her on the beach near the base. She was sitting in the sand, staring at the ocean. He sat beside her. "You okay?" She shook her head. "I don't know if I'll ever be okay." He nodded. "That's the price of surviving. You carry everyone with you." She looked at him. "How do you do it? How do you keep going?" He thought for a moment. "I remember why I serve. Not for glory, not for medals, but for the person next to me, for the mission, for the promise that their sacrifice meant something." She absorbed that. "You think mine did?" He turned to face her. "Maya, you saved my life. You saved dozens of others. You came back when you didn't have to. If that's not meaningful, I don't know what is." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. The following week, Maya was officially reinstated as an active-duty lieutenant. She was given the option to return to combat operations. She declined. "I've fought my war. Now I want to teach others to survive theirs." The Navy agreed. She was assigned to the Special Operations Medical Training Center. Her job was to train the next generation of combat medics, to pass on the skills, the mindset, the resilience. Her first class had 20 students, men and women, all eager, all terrified. She stood before them and said, "I'm not here to make you fearless. Fear keeps you alive. I'm here to teach you how to act despite the fear." They hung on every word. Over the months, she became one of the most respected instructors in the program. Students called her the Iron Doc, not because she was harsh, but because she was unbreakable. Ward visited her often. They had become close friends, not romantic, just two people who had shared the worst and survived. One afternoon, he brought her a gift, a shadow box. Inside was her original SEAL Team 4 patch, her name tape, and a Purple Heart. "You earned this, even if it took years to make it official." She stared at it, speechless. "Ward, I don't know what to say," he smiled. "Don't say anything. Just accept that you're one of the best damn SEALs I've ever known, even if you never officially wore the trident." She hugged him tightly. "Thank you for everything." He held her. "No, thank you for teaching me that heroes don't need permission to be extraordinary." If you respect those who serve in silence, comment respect below. 1 year later, Maya opened a combat medical training center in San Diego called the Black Sand Initiative. The logo was a trident wrapped in red ribbon, the symbol of SEAL Team 4. She trained new battlefield medics, teaching them the skills and mindset of staying until everyone's safe. At the first graduation ceremony, Ward appeared, now promoted to captain. "Heard you built something better than a unit, Doc. You built hope." She smiled. "You built the team that made it possible." On the wall, she hung a photo of her old team with the inscription, "Those who serve and survive teach the rest to live." As Ward prepared to leave, she said quietly, "I never thanked you for looking." He turned back. "We never stopped." The Black Sand Initiative became legendary. Medics trained there were known for their skill, composure, and refusal to quit. Maya ran it with the same intensity she brought to combat. Long hours, high standards, no excuses, but also with compassion. She understood fear, understood doubt, understood trauma. And she taught her students how to carry it without being crushed by it. One student asked her during a late-night session, "Ma'am, how do you deal with the ones you couldn't save?" She looked at him. "You honor them by saving the next one, and the one after that, and you never stop trying." He nodded. "Even when it hurts." She smiled sadly. "Especially when it hurts." Ward remained a constant presence in her life. He visited the center regularly, guest speaking for classes, sharing his experiences, supporting her mission. One evening after a particularly difficult training session, they sat on the center's roof watching the sunset. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" She gestured vaguely. "All of it. The war, the losses, the scars." He thought for a long moment. "I regret the people we lost, but I don't regret serving, and I don't regret finding you again." She looked at him. "You think we made a difference?" He didn't hesitate. "I know we did." They sat in comfortable silence, two warriors at peace. The center attracted attention from military leadership. Generals visited, admirals observed. They were impressed. Maya's methods were unconventional but effective. She didn't just teach medical procedures. She taught survival psychology, mental resilience, team bonding, how to make life or death decisions under pressure, how to live with those decisions afterward. One admiral pulled her aside. "Lieutenant Torres, have you considered returning to active SEAL operations? With the new policies, women can now officially serve." She shook her head. "I appreciate the offer, sir, but my fighting days are over. This is where I belong now." He respected that. "Then keep doing what you're doing. You're training the best medics in the fleet." Years passed. The Black Sand Initiative graduated hundreds of students. Many went on to combat deployments. Some came back wounded. A few didn't come back at all. Maya attended every funeral she could, stood with families, shared memories, carried the grief, because that's what leaders do. They carry the weight so others don't have to. Ward was promoted to commander again, then to captain. He deployed twice more. Each time he came back to the center, to her, to the place that felt like home. On his last visit before retirement, he found her in her office. "I'm done, Maya, hanging up the uniform." She looked up, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. 25 years is enough. Time to let the next generation take over." She smiled. "What will you do?" He shrugged. "Maybe teach, maybe write, maybe just sit on a beach and do nothing." She laughed. "You'd be terrible at doing nothing." He grinned. "Probably." The final scene showed Maya standing on the beach near the center. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. She looked down at the tattoo on her wrist, the trident wrapped in red ribbon, the numbers. 04, 21, 19. The day her team had left her behind. The day she had become something more than a soldier. She touched it gently and whispered, "Still one of you." The camera pulled back slowly. The American flag flew above the training center. Students ran drills in the yard. Life continued, legacy continued, and Maya Torres stood at the center of it all, not as a ghost, not as a survivor, but as a teacher, a leader, a reminder that some heroes never need permission to serve. They just do, again and again, until their last breath. If you believe true warriors never fade, subscribe to the Veteran Story. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.